slow. It's no more that fast. Is that right? So this is called slow ejection phase. Again, let me repeat it. What happened to these three chambers during the slow ejection phase? First of all, you must remember that atrium is still working as a reservoir. It is still accumulating the blood, returning back from the lungs. So we can say atrium is having still the pressure wave building up, and that pressure wave is called V wave, number one. Number two, mitral valve is closed. Number three, ventricle is still contracting. It has already completed isovolumetric contraction. It has already completed rapid ejection phase. Now it is entering into slow ejection phase, right? Still intraventricular pressure is more than intra-aortic pressure. Blood is still ejecting from the ventricle to the aorta, but pressure start falling in ventricle. As pressure start falling into ventricle, in the same way pressure in aorta also start falling. But one thing which you have to remember, that as aorta is an elastic vessel, it keep on squeezing the blood, and blood keep on moving forward into peripheral arterial tray. Is it clear? Now, after that, the next phase, which is very important one, in the next phase, what really happens? Next phase is that left ventricle start relaxing. It means there is onset of ventricular diastole. Again, this was the atrium, and here is the left ventricle, and left ventricle now start relaxing. Now, when left ventricle will start relaxing, naturally pressure in the left ventricle will start falling down, right? Now, let's concentrate on the left ventricular chamber. What is happening? It is relaxing. When left ventricle is relaxing, again, before we really know the whole story, look at the innocent atrium. It is still busy with accumulating the blood which was coming from lungs. It means still here, after the A wave was there, C wave was there, and now V wave is still continuing, right? What is happening to this? It has started relaxing. When it has started relaxing, it means this pressure will rapidly fall down. Now, if you remember, review from the beginning, when ventricle started contraction, pressure 0 to 5, it became more than atrium. At this particular point, at star 1, the event was mitral valve closure. Then you remember we discussed that pressure will go up to 81. Up to this point, in atrium, right? So until pressure in the ventricle, in spite of falling down, is more than the pressure in atrium, it will keep on relaxing as a closed chamber, and we will say that there is, yes, volumetric relaxation, right? And during this phase, again, let's first of all label this phase. What should be the name of this phase? Yes, isovolumetric relaxation phase. It means onset of systole is isovolumetric contraction. Onset of diastole is isovolumetric relaxation. During onset of the systole, during isovolumetric contraction, pressure is rapidly taken to the aortic pressure, and in case of isovolumetric relaxation, pressures are rapidly dropped so that they should eventually become less than atrial pressure. So during diastole, pressures rapidly fall down so that pressure in the ventricle should become eventually less than atrial pressure. So let's see in next phase what really happens, right? Now, what really happens in this stage is that pressure in the ventricle become really less than pressure in atrium. And meanwhile, of course, you will not forget, still the same thing happening, these innocent atria working as a tank and accumulating blood. Now we go to the next phase. Now in this next phase, aortic valve is already closed, and aorta and left ventricle are disconnected. But don't forget, aorta is not doing anything. Whatever blood it has received previously, it is squeezing that blood into arterial tray. Meanwhile, I told you this is relaxing. And when it is relaxing, pressure in the ventricle has become less than atrial. But still, ventricle was having some blood which was left over after the previous ejection. And this blood which was left over within the ventricle after the previous ejection, this is called end systolic volume. The volume of the blood present in the ventricle at the end of systole. Of course, here was also end systolic volume. But at this very moment, as soon as pressure in the ventricle become less than the pressure in atrium, what really happens that mitral valve will open. And as soon as mitral valve will open, now atrium and ventricle are connected. And all the blood, just remember, atrial contraction produced A wave, C wave was with onset of ventricular contraction, and until ventricle was contracting, there was a which wave? Yeah, it was V wave. So as soon as mitral valve open, this V wave fall down, because blood which was accumulated into atrium, right? Again, let me tell you what really happened. That as soon as left ventricle started relaxing, pressure in the left ventricle chamber rapidly start dropping. A time came when pressure in the ventricle became less than the atrial pressure. When pressure in the ventricle became less than atrial pressure, then of course, which valve will open? Which valve will open? Mitral valve will open, right? And the blood which was previously accumulated here and producing pressure of V wave, that blood will rapidly fall into, yes, ventricle. And this rapid fall of blood into ventricle is called rapid ventricular filling. But even though this is rapid ventricular filling, but it is without atrial contraction. Because atria is not contracting, so we say even though rapid filling, but it is passive filling. So we can say, what is this filling coming in?
80%.
Yeah. What is this? It is rapid passive ventricular filling. So ventricle had some blood left over from previous contraction. Then as soon as mitral valve open, there is filling of the ventricle, and this is very rapid filling because atrium was full of accumulated blood, and this accumulated blood rapidly rushed into ventricle. Is that clear? Now the next phase comes. Next phase is very interesting. Of course, this phase should be labeled as, this is ventricular filling phase, rapid passive ventricular filling phase. Is that right? This is also ventricular diastole. This, right? This is also ventricular, yes, diastole. Then ventricular diastole will continue, and the next phase is very important. Then what really happens during this phase? Now, in this next phase, look this diagram very carefully. Of course, aortic valve is already
Open,
closed. Aortic valve is already closed. Ventricle is disconnected with the aorta. It is trying to get the blood from input system. So which valve is open?
Mitral.
Mitral valve is open, right? Mitral valve is open, right? We already know, you remember, the blood which was left over from previous contraction was end systolic volume, and due to rapid filling, some blood was added. What was that blood? Yes, please. Rapid passive ventricular filling. After that, accumulated blood has fallen. Accumulated blood has fallen into ventricle.